Hello and welcome back to another first look Draftkings stream for Week 12 NFL DFS. This is not for the Thanksgiving slate. This is for the main slate on Sunday. We have every team in action this week, including Thanksgiving. So we got a big slate of games to go through. Had a lot of QB controversy already this morning as we're taping this on Wednesday afternoon. And I hope you guys all had a great Thanksgiving, whether you're watching this on Twitch or on YouTube. We greatly appreciate you tuning in. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more first look information for the coming weeks. So again, these are first looks. These are very early in the week. We've already had 4 QB changes, it seems, this morning. So, anything is subject to change no matter what we're talking about on the screen. But we're going to build kind of our top overall plays, not necessarily a cash game lineup, but more like a hybrid alternative kind of approach here. So without further ado, this is my first look at the slate. So let's go ahead and dive in. We covered the FanDuel one yesterday, so if you want to take a look at the FanDuel one after this one, feel free to go to our YouTube and check it out. At the QB position, we do have Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson up top above 8K. Justin Fields comes in a little bit cheaper. Justin Herbert, same thing. Those guys are at 7K. And then you have this interesting range of these sub 7K quarterbacks in that 6K range. Geno Smith versus Vegas, streamer matchup. Joe Burrow, 6,700, finishing as one of the top QBs last week against Tennessee now at 6,700. You have Kyler Murray, who we don't really know if he's going to play or not. So I would lean towards Colt McCoy probably getting another week here as that team kind of goes through it. I just feel like Colt McCoy is probably the best situation for that team moving forward as of right now until Kyler Murray gets better. So I don't expect him to play. And then we do have Tua Tagovailoa here against Houston, sitting at 6,900. Right now, as I'm looking at things, I think that, obviously we can talk about the running quarterbacks all we want. But in this top range, I think that the guys that I want to circle around here are probably Justin Herbert, who sits at a 7K price tag. Very, very strong there. I know that the fantasy output isn't necessarily the greatest, but it did trend upward. You saw clear trending in the positive direction for Herbert when we saw Keenan Allen come back for that stint. I know Mike Williams got hurt during the game. Austin Eckler played well. If they get those weapons back and Josh Palmer is as effective as he has been, then I think that you can go to Justin Herbert at 7K. He got a huge upgrade from the last time that he was on a DraftKings main slate, so that is a little bit concerning, but I think that he's definitely a streamer option for you. If Justin Fields is good to go, I think he's a solid option against the Jets. I do worry a little bit about pressure, but again, Fields has been able to torch everybody on the ground and put up another great performance last week despite the shoulder injury. Lamar Jackson against Jacksonville just doesn't seem to be able to give me the floor that I really want here. We just don't want... These are numbers that Lamar Jackson has just not put up in his several years as being a fantasy QB for this starting for this offense. So I'm not sure when things actually turn around for him. He seems to have found a connection with Demarcus Robinson. We know that Mark Andrews is several weeks removed from this injury that keeps nagging him, so maybe they get things turned around here. But the games, I just have not been impressed with what Lamar Jackson's brought to the table, so I'm a little hesitant to click his name. Maybe the best thing for us to do is pay all the way up at the top, which is what we did last week with Josh Allen. I know that didn't work the best, but Patrick Mahomes going up against this Rams defense, while the defense is still very, very competent for this Rams team, we've seen Patrick Mahomes put up 4 straight performances of 30 DraftKings points or more. Has a lot to do with the fact that he has had over 300 passing yards in each of the last 4 games as well, getting that extra 3-point bonus on DraftKings. The touchdowns have been amazing, and we also have a lot of news for this team. Obviously, Travis Kelce's healthy, but other than that, Juju Smith-Schuster's practicing. We know that Kadarius Toney is not practicing as of Wednesday. Mecole Hardman still out, obviously. So, and then we also learned that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is also going to be on the IR. So this Chiefs team's kind of going through it a little bit. They are going to go up against Bryce Perkins and the Rams, who we found out is going to start for this Rams team, or give enough. They're going to give him opportunities to be able to be available to slot into that starting lineup role. He's taking first team reps right now, so that worries me a little bit. This spread should be pretty high, so maybe we don't see a ceiling game from Patrick Mahomes like we've seen in the past couple weeks here. So there's a lot of question marks on the slate in terms of QB starting off, but I think where I want to start builds is kind of where I started builds yesterday on FanDuel and go with Joe Burrow, 6,700. We'll see if Jamar Chase is good to go here, but Joe Burrow coming off an extremely efficient passing game on a Sunday against Pittsburgh. Huge bounce back for what that disaster was early on in the season. We've seen him now go in games that Joe Mixon's not as heavily involved in, just go absolutely berserk. We saw that game in Atlanta. We saw the game in Pittsburgh. Joe Mixon's now on the sideline, and we have Samaje Perine to talk about too. So I do want to focus on that here as we move on. So maybe we try to play Joe Burrow in other instances, and maybe we go with a guy like Geno Smith, who's 6K. I know that the ceiling compared to Joe Burrow is probably not the same, but I do want to see and talk about Samaje Perine. So while I'm not going to decide on quarterback to an extent here, I'm going to lock in Geno Smith against a Vegas team that has basically been destroyed by every single quarterback that they've played so far this season, even Russell Wilson to an extent here. So I like what Geno Smith brings to the table. He's got 2 full weapons now on the wide receiver side, and Kenneth Walker's been an absolute monster. So I do think that a very competent Geno Smith game is coming. So right now, I'm going to put him as my QB1. That is subject to change. Obviously, it's the first look, so just putting him in there just to kind of move on and walk you through the slate. Any other dumpster diving options for QB? It's pretty barren this week. I know we were targeting some of that last week with Mariota, with Daniel Jones. The Jones part worked out. Maybe you can go with Taylor Heineke, but I feel like those touchdowns are a little bit more unreliable on that side of things. 0 touchdowns for Heineke over the past 2 weeks in terms of passing volume. So this is just not enough for me to get there at 5,300. So I'll probably end up going to Geno Smith as my lowest option and then working my way back up towards the end of the player pool. Running back, we do have this opportunity now to talk about McCaffrey, Eckler, Henry up at the top in the 8K range. Remember, if you were around yesterday, we mentioned in the FanDuel first look that maybe some of these guys just aren't popping point per dollar compared to some of the guys in the below ranges. So I think I will probably stay on that approach. If I were to go anywhere, I'd probably lean with Austin Eckler. I do respect the New Orleans the defense enough here to where, and there's enough going on between Mitchell and McCaffrey where I think McCaffrey still is totally fine. He's just going to have to run a little bit luckier on the touchdowns, because if he doesn't get a touchdown, he's probably not going to hit value. And if he does, it's going to be because he has a lot of passing volume. I expect San Francisco to establish a lead very early and keep things going from there, which could end up phasing McCaffrey out just a little bit, or just enough to be able to not pay off that price tag. That's just a first look glance. Eckler, definitely like it, especially if Mike Williams does end up missing. Derrick Henry against Cincinnati, it's fine. It's just nothing that screams, I'm going to play this guy right away and click him in. Josh Jacobs has had extremely healthy volume over the past several games. You can point to the one game that we played him. It was this one against New Orleans, where they scored 0 points and got 10 rushing attempts. But they really tried their best to give Jacobs all the touches they possibly can. I think at 7,700, this is still a really, really strong price tag for Jacobs. I'm not going to click his name just yet because I want to run through some of these other options for you guys. But Josh Jacobs is definitely the guy that I would click to in the 7K range first. Kenneth Walker, not going to pair him with Geno Smith for this example, but I still think that Kenneth Walker is very strong and can be a guy that you can roster and be in your running back player pool this week. I do want to click on James Conner's name, so we'll talk about him really quick. 6,600, coming off of the Monday night performance where I didn't think it was a good matchup against San Francisco. They just have nobody else to give the ball to in the running game. Remember, they cut Eno Benjamin, and so while they kind of go through that and give some rushing attempts to Keontae Ingram, this is their guy, and so they're going to try to give James Conner anywhere from 18 to 20 touches here, maybe even more, depending on game script. The Chargers have been giving up a lot of dump-offs to opposing running backs too, which is going to increase this area of his box score. And so 3 touchdowns over the past 2 weeks is really strong for James Conner as he, kind of recovers from that injury. So I like that price tag as 6,600. I think it's very, very solid. We're going to go ahead and put him in that slot there. I think Dameon Pierce will continue to be popular as he continues to get a very, very solid workload at 6,100. The tag compared to the volume just doesn't match up for him, so I could see that trending in a positive direction. Jeff Wilson Jr. was a huge staple in the FanDuel first look. 5,900 feels way too cheap. We're going to slot him in there again. It's very simple. Get the guy that has 18 to 20 rushing attempts against the Houston defense and call it a day. As far as all the running backs on this slate, I do think that we should focus on this range quite a bit here. There's going to be a lot that happens down the line and towards the end of the week. First of all, like I mentioned before, Clyde Edwards-Helaire earlier on the stream is on the IR now, and this was already Pacheco's role last week, but now he gets a full workload, or should get a full workload outside of whatever Jerick McKinnon takes from him. At 5,500, you can do a lot worse. Michael Carter, he wouldn't have been a guy that I was going to talk about, but considering that Zach Wilson is not the quarterback anymore and you have Mike White starting, there was a stretch in 2021 where Michael Carter was the main running back for the Jets and Mike White was in there, and he threw, I want to say, there was a 2 or 3 week stint where we saw Mike White give Michael Carter around 20 targets out of the backfield. Could see that kind of approach here, or kind of a lean that way, but bumps up to some of these Jets skill players for the majority of the rest of the season, depending on how that Mike White situation goes. Samaje Perine going to be the guy that we're going to talk about here. He's the cover boy on this Week 12 first look. And, while the touches aren't necessarily something that screams fantasy viability, Joe Mixon went down earlier in the game. So you would expect anywhere from 18 to 20 touches for Samaje Perine. He's going to get the bulk of the receiving targets, which is something that I always like to have for a Cincinnati running back. And I also think that there's extreme touchdown upside here. I'm not expecting 3 touchdowns. I think last week was an anomaly for that. But he still could get you 1 to 2. And that's just enough here for a great play at 5,600. So instead of going Joe Burrow's way here, I do want to get access to Perine on this slate. We didn't play him yesterday on FanDuel, but at 5,600 on DraftKings, I like this range a lot, and I think you can do a lot worse. We got burned by the Drake play last week, but if Gus Edwards is out, he's back in play here too. And then I do want to talk about one more guy, and let's talk about Rachaad White here, who is going to actually we'll talk about 2 more guys because I always forget this other guy. But Rachaad White, 5,100. Tampa has yet to make any sort of statement about Fournette's availability. And this is something that we're going to have to kind of wait on and see. But Rachaad White's been trending upward for a while now, and I think he's finally seeing that opportunity of, okay, if Fournette's going to be hurt, let's give Rachaad White, the young rookie, a bunch of work here. They're coming off of a huge bye week after the Germany experience that they had in Week 10. And so they've had a lot of time to kind of recover here. And we always talk about how rookies are getting that next bump up as we kind of talk about them being a huge part of the offense after the bye. So I like Rachaad White quite a bit, and I hope that he does get some of that passing game work that Fournette would have had. So keeping an eye on Rachaad White, he's obviously one of the best value plays of the slate if Leonard Fournette were to not suit up. The last guy I want to talk about really quickly is going to be Latavius Murray, if I ever find him. He's at 5K on DraftKings. This is more of a I would say usually more of a FanDuel play, but Latavius Murray is actually getting targets, guys. So 4 targets in Week 11, 3 targets in Week 10, and this is a situation where we are now a couple days removed from the Melvin Gordon waiving, and so Latavius Murray is going to be in line for what I think is going to be 18 to 22 touches. I'm not saying 25 touches because I do think that Mike Boone's able to take some work from him. But in a spot against Carolina, I think that this is an interesting spot to get Latavius Murray. And it's going to be a situation where the whole field is going to be all over this play. But I think it's cheap enough to where you're just playing it in cash games and moving on. So we'll put Latavius Murray in here as the flex option. And so we have 3 running backs that are in this 5K range, 6K range that I really like, which again, I don't know if you have to pay up for the running backs considering who we have at the wide receiver position this week. So we'll go ahead and talk about that now. Tyreek Hill, 8,800. Devontae Adams, 8,600. DeAndre Hopkins, 7,700. And then we'll see if Chase gives it a go. But there's quite a bit to talk about here. I do expect T. Higgins to be quite popular. And if we have a situation where Chase is out and Joe Mixon is out, then I do think you can play Samaje Perine and T. Higgins in the same build. I'm going to start there. I think that T. Higgins shouldn't be less than 7K on the slate. I know maybe we'll find a way to get Perine in there, but I still think that the situation is a little bit up in the air in terms of Joe Mixon's concussion protocol. So we'll see how that goes. Devontae Adams, keep an eye on him. I think I like that price a lot at 8,600. If he's going to continue to get this amount of targets here, I think that I'm not expecting 30 DraftKings points, but I am expecting somewhere around 10 to 13 targets. I think that's probably what we can expect moving forward the rest of the season as Las Vegas continues to claw and fight and try to get into the AFC playoff picture. And I think it's obvious that they probably won't make it there, but Devontae Adams is going to be a big part of that offense the rest of the season. So 8,600, I think that's pretty cheap compared to what he's been doing. So I don't know if I can get there in this build, considering that we only have 4,900 left, but I do think that if we get some situations where, Leonard Fournette misses and Rachaad White starts, if we get a situation where we want to plug in Samaje Perine, then that extra money could potentially get you up to that Devontae Adams play towards the end of the weekend. Other pricing on DraftKings this week, have Amari Cooper going up against Tampa Bay at 6,400. That's interesting considering he is at home and he's coming off of a massive game there. DK Metcalf at 6,500. Tyler Lockett at 6,200. I don't really want to decide between the two, so I won't right now. But that's something I'm looking at and taking a very, very close gander at. Chris Godwin at 6K makes a lot of sense. I think Terry McLaurin at 5,800 makes a ton of sense as well. You would have expected a little bit more from McLaurin the other day, but I do think we can go back to the well here. So I like Godwin. I like McLaurin. We're going to be penciling at least one of those guys in here. But as we move down the list, if Mike Williams is absent for whatever reason, Josh Palmer becomes a play. I'm not quite too excited about firing up Allen Robinson. I understand this 3,200, the second opponent ranking is enticing, but don't let that bait you in. I feel like the whole offense takes a step back with Bryce Perkins and his quarterback. We'll see how that situation develops over the course of the week. Curtis Samuel is a nice tournament play. I think Drake London is a guy we need to take a look at. We talked about him yesterday on the FanDuel First Look. No Kyle Pitts, and Marcus Mariota is basically required to do something here because I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball effectively against Washington's front seven. Washington's got one of the best front sevens here over the last 4 weeks in terms of limiting fantasy points to opposing running backs. So when you're looking for something to target in this game, I think that Drake London makes a lot of sense at 4,900. He might not be an absolute must block, but he definitely is should be considered heavily everywhere. Demarcus Robinson, maybe a guy that you can get cheap value off of. Expect somebody from this Jets team to be a spark in this offense, but none of those guys just scream cash game plays to me. And now we're getting into this range of something that I don't think we can touch anymore. So let's go back up to the top. I think we have to make a decision between Chris Godwin and Terry McLaurin, and then we can talk. Let's just get Drake London in there right now and go from there. Brian, what's up, dude? We're currently recording a DraftKings First Look for YouTube, so I'm going to keep going and focusing on that. Guys, feel free to chime in. I see a lot of you in here, so feel free to chat and give some opinions on some plays. We're going to have to circle back and get a little bit more condensed player pool into this thing, but for right now, we're going to try to probably just put in again, I don't really want Lockett or Metcalf necessarily for this build, but I do want somebody with consistent volume in a spot where they're going to have to pass. And I feel like that is probably going to be Chris Godwin here. The reason I didn't go Terry McLaurin is mainly because I have a pass catcher on the other side with Drake London. So we might get a situation where I end up pivoting to McLaurin, or maybe he becomes a better player over the course of the week. But right now I'm going to go with Chris Godwin here at 6K. Just too cheap. And remember, we just had a situation where we haven't seen Tampa Bay play since Germany in week 10. So, and what did he do there? He caught a touchdown. So we have not seen Chris Godwin score a touchdown on a main slate in quite some time. I think this is a week that he can do that, and Tampa Bay has a couple weeks under the belt to get some rest. So I like Chris Godwin at 6K. Now to the tight end position. We'll talk about the top of the position first. I think Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews are fine for tournaments, but when it comes to cash games, I just can't seem to get there. I know Travis Kelce always has that 2 or 3 or even 4 touchdown upside like we saw earlier this year. He's coming off a game with 3 touchdowns. That's why his price is skyrocketing. I think that this is a situation where you're not playing the top guys, and we're kind of stuck in the situation where we talked about on the FanDuel slate, where I think that this is going to be kind of this pay down range. We know that Darren Waller's on the IR. Gerald Everett's been banged up. If Gerald Everett goes, he's a fantastic play. But Kyle Pitts is on the IR as well. George Kittle going up against New Orleans. Doesn't seem like you really need to have a boom bust. Like, it's very boom bust for George Kittle. I love the spot last week against Arizona. So that's kind of why I said Gerald Everett. If he's able to give it a go here, he's in a fantastic spot, although a little bit expensive for where I like to play my cash game plays. Now we have Tyler Higbee again. The Bryce Perkins thing comes into play here. I don't love having anybody in this Rams offense against Kansas City. I mean, yes, there will be plenty of opportunities for garbage time for Tyler Higbee, but just don't know if it's something that I can necessarily click on or rely upon. Komet Dulcich, kind of the same situation. We don't know the status of Fields just yet. I know he's practicing, looking to give it a go, but again, a lot of stuff to consider as it is only Wednesday. David Njoku was one of our favorite options on the FanDuel first look. We'll probably end up going back to his direction here at 3,600. I think that the volume he's seeing has been fantastic. Obviously, you would have wanted a little bit more, against Buffalo here, but really consistent targets over the past month outside of that game. So I like what I'm seeing from David Njoku, and I think that you can roster him in a top play type scenario. Foster Moreau against Seattle to get more exposure to that game, I don't mind. I do think that Hayden Hurst is worth a look. I think that Noah Fant is worth a look as well. And Tyler Conklin does get an upgrade with Mike White at quarterback. But right now we're going to go back to the well and go to David Njoku at 3,600. It leaves us a lot of money. And what we're going to be able to do here is potentially spend up at a different position. So let me know what you guys think where we should upgrade. I'm thinking quarterback. I'm also thinking potentially upgrading from James Conner as well. But let's look at the defense really quick. And we have a lot to discuss because now we have so many QB changes over the past 2 hours. Again, we're recording this on Wednesday, so we know that the Texans have replaced Davis Mills with Kyle Allen. We know that Sam Darnold's starting for the Panthers. We know that Bryce Perkins is probably going to get the job for the Rams. And then we know that Mike White is starting for Zach Wilson this week. So a lot of defenses that are not going to be priced accordingly because of where they may have sat. Maybe not too many changes because those quarterbacks all suck, right? So it's kind of one of those things where how many opportunities do we really get? I think that the one thing that I want to look for is where are the Chiefs on this slate? And I feel like that's probably the key to getting everything taken care of. So 2,800, 2,800 for the Chiefs. Remember, Bryce Perkins is a dual threat quarterback. For those who've played preseason with us, you know how talented he is. However, if he's starting in his first NFL game or one of the first NFL games, I can't remember if he's actually started a regular season game before, that could be a really, really tough place to play, especially in Kansas City, in the cold weather, no dome, and Kansas City is rolling. So I feel like there's a lot of instances where this goes really bad for Bryce Perkins. At this moment, you have to rank Chiefs defense number one. Going through the list, though, trying to find these other quarterbacks. Nothing down here. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly Chiefs or bust under 3,000. And then you get to the more expensive tournament decisions. Broncos are up here at 3,800. Dolphins get to face a backup quarterback. The Niners against Andy Dalton is just hilarious. So you have a lot of instances here. The Bears also make an interesting case against Mike White, but I do think that the Chiefs are your go-to here. So I'm going to click that name and then see what we can do here. You got 2,300 to play with, so you can upgrade QB if you wanted to. That leaves you with the ability to get Patrick Mahomes. So there you go, guys. Stream's over. Anyway, though, thank you for the first look. Thank you for watching. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe to the video. We're back every single Tuesday for a FanDuel first look on Twitch. Wednesday, Draftkings first look. We're going to get more involved on the Twitch side of things and the YouTube side of things over the next coming weeks into the playoffs as we focus in on Super Bowl content. And yeah, that's going to do it for the Draftkings first look. As always, good night and good skill.